Jason Statham walked into a bar in Chicago to have a drink and relax, but he didn't know that he would be met by an FBI agent who knows that there will be a robbery of the Chicago National Bank tonight, and to find out more, watch to the end. Like and subscribe to the channel, so you will show how you like this story. Chicago was in the midst of an evening bustle. The streets of the South Loop trembled with the roar of traffic, and neon signs painted the wet asphalt in shades of blue and red. It was cool, a light breeze blew scraps of old newspapers along the sidewalks. Jason Statham walked down a narrow alley, heading for one of the oldest bars in the area, the Red Lantern. It was not the kind of place that attracted tourists. Only those who were truly looking for privacy, not loud companies, knew this place. When he entered, the warm smell of whiskey, old wood, and cheap tobacco hit his nose. The bar was half empty, two tipsy movers were sitting at the counter, and an elderly couple of friends were sipping beer by the fireplace, lazily exchanging memories. Jason nodded to the bartender, sat in the far corner and ordered a bourbon without ice. He had barely taken his first sip when a man in a gray cloak sat down next to him. He looked about 45 years old, a little battered by life, but with a keen gaze. He turned nervously, as if looking for someone, then leaned closer. "Mr. Statham, I need your help." Jason raised an eyebrow, but was in no hurry to answer. The man was clearly nervous, he was tapping his fingers on the table, his lips were trembling, and his eyes were darting from side to side. "Do you know me?" Statham finally asked, twirling the glass in his hand. "Who doesn't know you?" The man grinned, but the smile quickly disappeared. "My name is Tom Harper. I work for the FBI. And I didn't come to you for nothing." "FBI?" Jason chuckled. "Sorry, but I have neither the desire or the time to get involved in some kind of intelligence game. This is not a game." Tom leaned even closer. "Tonight, Chicago is going to have the most daring robbery in 20 years. We know that a group of professionals is preparing to open the National Bank. We have evidence, we have suspects, but we are running out of time. We need someone who can act fast." Jason sipped his bourbon, watching Harper over the rim of his glass. "And why do you think that person should be me?" Harper swallowed nervously. "You are not just an actor. You are a former athlete, a fighter, a man who understands how the criminal world works. We need someone who can think outside the box, who can improvise." Statham rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "I am not a cop. I am not an agent. I do not save cities on government orders. But you can't just walk away knowing that the crime of the century is about to happen in your city." Harper looked him in the eye. "They're not just robbing a bank, Mr. Statham. They're going to steal the identities of hundreds of people, destroy evidence, and probably leave a few dead bodies behind." Jason said nothing. He hated being roped into this kind of thing. Too many times had he heard promises that it won't take long or everything is under control. And it always ended in bloody mayhem. The bartender approached the table, glancing at Harper out of the corner of his eye. "Everything okay, Mr. Statham?" "For now. But bring me another bourbon." The bartender nodded and left. Tom shifted in his chair again. "You don't have much time. The robbers are already gathering. We have information that they're using counterfeit security cards to get in without firing a shot. They'll only need 10 minutes to crack the main safe. And then they'll be safe. Why can't the FBI just take them on the spot?" Harper rubbed the bridge of his nose tiredly. "We don't know who's in on it. Bank security? The police? Maybe one of our own. We're afraid the operation will fail before it even starts. If we leave too early, they'll just disappear." Statham shook his head. "And you want me to deal with a group of professionals on my own?" "Not on my own." Tom quickly pulled a small flash drive out of his inside pocket and placed it on the table. "It's all the data we have. Video from the cameras, their escape routes, the bank's plan. You decide how to proceed." We just leave you alone." Jason stared at the flash drive in silence. Then he looked at Harper. "And if I say no? Then you'll read in the papers in the morning that Chicago lost millions of dollars, and possibly several lives." Silence hung between them. The bar was playing softly, the movers had long since left, and the old men were laughing at old stories by the fireplace. Statham looked at his glass, then back at Harper. He picked up the flash drive and shoved it into his pocket. "I don't know you, Harper. And I can't promise to do your job. But if I see something I don't like," he leaned closer, "I'll do it my way." Harper nodded, relief in his eyes. "That's enough." Statham finished his bourbon and stood up. It was time to begin the hunt. Chicago was even more dangerous at night than it was during the day. The city was wide awake, sirens, honking horns, neon lights reflecting off puddles on the pavement. The air was heavy, thick with a mix of smoke, gasoline, and the smell of coffee from late-night diners. The subway rumbled in the distance, and the wind whistled between the tall buildings. Jason stood on the roof of a nearby warehouse, watching the group below. They were gathering around a black van, whispering, glancing over their shoulders every now and then. It was all going according to plan, the gang was getting ready to do their thing. Rivers was telling the truth. These guys weren't amateurs. They moved with confidence, each with a role. One was driving, one was scanning the perimeter, one was checking bags. Jason had seen groups like this before, quick, precise, silent. He took a deep breath, tensed his muscles, and braced himself. The only way to stop them was to catch up with the leader and knock him out. The van started up, the criminals loaded the last bags with guns and cash. Jason didn't waste any time. He ran up to the roof next to him, trying to stay hidden. At that moment, one of the men below looked up. "Hey, what the?" His voice was drowned out by the sound of the engine, but he managed to say something to his partner. The van took off, and the two men ran into the alley, obviously going to check what they had imagined. Jason didn't wait. He jumped down, hitting his shoulder on the metal fire escape ladder, and landed right in front of one of the bandits. "Shit," the man screamed and reached for his gun, but Jason was faster. An elbow hit the adversary and he dropped his gun. Another hit and he was already lying in a puddle. The second criminal turned and ran, but Jason didn't chase him. There was little time. The van turned the corner, out of sight. "No way," Jason muttered, and ran up to the hood of the nearest car, pushing off and grabbing the fire escape ladder. He climbed onto the roof and saw the van again. The van sped through the narrow streets, barely missing trash cans and parked cars. Jason raced along the roofs parallel to them. There was an alley ahead, and behind it, a high-rise with a narrow balcony. "If I jump, I'll either make it or I won't," he said to himself. He ran up and jumped. He felt gravity pulling him down, but his hands still grabbed the edge of the balcony. Jason pulled himself up, flipped over the railing, and ran on. Below, the van turned into an underground parking lot. Jason stopped and wiped the sweat from his forehead. "So, you're going to hide? Let's see who gets who." He started to walk down the stairs, but at that moment he heard approaching sirens. The Chicago police were already on the gang's tail. That meant there was even less time left. Jason sped up, jumping from one level of the fire escape to another until he found himself in a dark alley. The dim lights in the underground parking lot cast ominous shadows. The van was parked against the far wall, and nearby, the criminals were quickly transferring bags into another car. Jason moved forward quietly, hiding behind the concrete columns. "Hurry up, damn it," one of the robbers said irritably. "The cops are on your tail." "Almost done." "Where's Tommy?" "He should be here by now," another replied. Jason saw his target, the leader, a large man in a leather jacket with massive hands, barking out orders. He pulled out his gun and used the car as cover. "One more load and we're out," the leader yelled. Jason knew there was no time to think. He lunged forward, knocking one of the criminals down, and then lunged at the second, landing a clean blow to the chest. The leader spun around, grabbing his gun, but Jason knocked his hand aside with a punch. A shot rang out, and the bullet went into the concrete wall. A fight ensued. The leader was strong, but Jason was faster. 2 punches, one to the body, one to the jaw, and the criminal fell to the ground. The sirens were getting louder. The remaining robbers scattered, but the police were already surrounding the building. Jason leaned over the leader and grinned. "Too slow, buddy." When the cops burst into the parking lot, Jason had already disappearing into the night. He had done his job. Chicago was awake. The city was living its own night. The sound of police sirens mingled with the roar of cars. Neon signs flashed like lights on a runway. Jason knew that his job was not over yet. The gang that had staged the night robbery was only part of a larger gang, and he had to get to the main link. After a night of pursuit across rooftops and underground parking, Jason hid in an alley, hiding from police patrols. He heard one of the criminals on the radio tell someone, "Boss, we're busted. Tommy's taken, Chris has escaped, and the cargo is in a safe place. We need extraction." Jason couldn't let them get away. He knew that the only way to catch the leader was to follow the fugitives. He crept unnoticed to a parked motorcycle, ripped out the spark plug wires, and started it. The roar of the engine broke the silence. The criminals saw him, rushed to the black SUV and took off. Jason pressed the gas pedal to the metal and chased them. Race through hell. The SUV sped through the streets of Chicago, cutting corners and almost crashing into other cars. Jason pursued them, weaving between traffic. The wind was in his face, the adrenaline was off the charts. "Hold on, Jason," he muttered, leaning forward and accelerating. Suddenly, the criminals turned into a narrow alley. Jason followed them, but barely had time to react when he saw a box of trash flying at him. He leaned sharply to the side, the box flew past, but the next moment he heard the sound of gunshots. Bullets knocked sparks off the asphalt. One of the criminals leaned out of the window of the SUV and fired at him. Jason could not respond. He did not have a gun, but he could use the streets to his advantage. He slammed on the brakes as he turned the corner, skidding sideways, then grabbed the nearest trash can, shoved it forward, and steered it right in front of the SUV. There was a loud bang, and the car jerked out of control and crashed into the warehouse doors. Flames and shadows. Jason dropped the bike and ran to the car. The door opened, and one of the criminals fell out, trying to escape, but Jason caught up with him and knocked him unconscious with a powerful blow. Suddenly, there was a creak from behind. The driver got out of the car and pulled out a shotgun. "You shouldn't have come here, kid." His voice was full of rage. Jason saw his hands shaking. He realized that the criminal was scared, but ready to shoot. Without giving him time to think, Jason lunged forward, grabbed the barrel of the shotgun, and kneed the criminal in the stomach. A shot rang out, the pellets went off to the side, and Jason elbowed the gun out of his enemy's hands and knocked him out. While he was breathing heavily, more cars started pulling up to the scene of the accident. Black SUVs without license plates. Masked men were getting out, holding machine guns in their hands. Jason realized that this was serious. "It's time to leave," he said to himself. He rushed to the fire escape and climbed onto the roof of the warehouse. The armed men below started shooting at him, but he slid in the darkness, hiding behind the ventilation pipes. From the roof, he saw the criminals loading containers into a truck. "What are you carrying there?" he muttered, taking out his phone and taking a few pictures. Suddenly, one of the criminals noticed him and shouted, "On the roof! Kill him!" The bullets flew past his head. Jason didn't hesitate, he ran to the edge of the roof and jumped. The flight lasted a split second, but it was enough for him to grab onto the cable stretched between the buildings. He wobbled, but did not fall, and then pushed off with force and landed on the neighboring roof. Looking back, he saw the criminals fussing, preparing to leave. He had to act. He grabbed a metal pipe and threw it at the transformer standing below. There was an explosion, sparks flew in all directions, and the street lights went out. The sudden darkness gave him an advantage. In the confusion, Jason climbed down, got into the truck's cabin and knocked out the driver. Then he pressed the gas and tore off at full speed, taking the containers away. The enemies realized what was happening and opened fire. Bullets pierced the metal, but Jason pressed the pedal, maneuvering between the containers. He knew he couldn't get far, but he had a plan. He swerved on the Chicago River Bridge, slamming on the brakes. The car skidded, sending containers of valuable cargo flying off the truck and scattering across the bridge. A second later, police cars appeared. The criminals, realizing they couldn't get away, began to retreat, but it was too late. Jason climbed out of the cab and looked at the river, where the lights of the city were reflected. He pulled his phone out of his pocket and looked at the photos he had taken. "Now I know who's behind this," he said, and disappeared into the darkness, leaving the police to handle the rest. The hunt was just beginning. Chicago was shrouded in the morning fog. After a long night, the streets began to fill with people rushing to work, unaware that somewhere in the shadows, the final act of a dangerous game was unfolding. Jason Statham knew his goal was close. After hijacking a semi-trailer and turning over the data to the police, he had tracked down the gang's leader, Darius Colton, a powerful crime boss who controlled the illegal arms trade. Now all that was left was to finish the job. Colton took refuge in one of his safe houses, an abandoned factory on the outskirts of the city. The building, overgrown with ivy and covered in cracks, looked lifeless, but armed thugs were sure to be hiding inside. Jason parked his car nearby and pulled a pistol with a silencer from the trunk, ready for a fight. He slowly made his way to the back entrance, stepped inside with a muffled creak, and stood still, listening. Voices were heard somewhere ahead. The boss said to wait here. He'll figure it out. And if that bastard comes here, then he'll regret it. Jason grinned. He was already here. He slipped into the shadows, rounded the old conveyor belt, and slammed into the nearest guard, hitting him hard on the back of the head. The body fell to the floor. Before the second guard could turn around, Jason was behind him, twisting his arm and knocking him out with one blow. All that was left was to get to Colton. In the beast's lair. Climbing the creaky metal stairs to the second floor, Jason spotted Colton. He was sitting at a massive oak desk, casually twirling a cigar in his fingers. Two armed guards stood nearby. Finally, Colton looked up, looking straight at Jason. "I heard what you did last night. Impressive. But you were wrong if you thought you'd get out of here alive." "I'm rarely wrong," Jason replied, slowly approaching. Colton nodded to the guards. One of them pulled out a machine gun and pulled the trigger. But Jason was faster. He darted to the side, taking cover behind a column. Bullets knocked out chunks of concrete, showering him with shrapnel. He waited for the right moment, then took out the first guard with one precise shot. The second rushed towards him, but Jason met him with a powerful blow to the chest, then a knee to the face. He fell unconscious. Only Colton remained. Well, now without servants. Jason grinned, pointing the gun at him. But Colton didn't look scared. He slowly stood up, pushing the chair away, and took off his jacket. Underneath was a bulletproof vest. "Let's do it without weapons. Let's sort it out like men." Jason smiled. He loved a challenge like that. He threw the gun aside and raised his fists. Colton moved first, throwing a sharp punch to the body. Jason ducked, but the man was fast. The second punch caught him in the side, forcing him back. Colton was big and heavy, but Jason knew how to deal with him. He shifted sharply to the left, ducked the next punch, and drove his fist into the man's solar plexus. Colton coughed, but did not fall. He grabbed Jason by the shoulders, trying to pull him down, but Jason tripped him and threw him onto the table. "This is the end, Colton." He spat out blood and grinned. "Do you really think this will change anything? There are many like me. Tomorrow, another will take my place." Jason leaned closer. "Tomorrow will not come for you." At that moment, the police burst into the building. Jason stepped back as the cops pinned Colton down and cuffed him. "We got an anonymous call. Do you happen to know who it was?" the detective asked, grinning. Jason just shrugged. He'd done what he had to. He took a breath of the cold morning air as he walked out of the building and watched the sun rise. Another night. Another case. And he'd disappear into the shadows again. Later that evening, Jason walked into the familiar bar where it all began. The room was filled with cigarette smoke, the music was soft, and the bartender was wiping glasses as if nothing had happened. As Jason walked through the door, several regulars turned around. "Look who's back," one of them exclaimed loudly. "Didn't you just single-handedly take out Colton's entire gang?" Jason just smirked and walked up to the bar. The bartender set a glass of whiskey in front of him. "On the house. You deserve it." "You shouldn't have," Jason said, taking the glass. The bar perked up. Someone clapped him on the shoulder, someone raised a toast in his honor. "You know, this town is a little safer because of you," the bartender said, filling another glass. Jason took a sip and looked at his reflection in the glass. He knew there would be new challenges ahead, new enemies. But tonight he could allow himself to savor the victory. He set the empty glass on the counter, turned around, and headed for the exit. His eyes were determined. Tomorrow was a new day. The finale.